So how's your daughter doing with no school or anything?
She starts distance learning through her elementary school tomorrow.
Oh my gosh. Well, let me know if you need anything. I've been collecting stuff for my friend in Montana who's a third grade teacher who starts that next Monday. And
Okay.
she's like, I don't even know how to start. So I've been trying to collect other people's schedules and things like that for their kiddos. And yeah.
Call me crazy. Didn't you
Mm.
used to be a teacher?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, okay. I thought I remembered
Yeah.
that. I didn't think I
Yeah.
was making that up.
Yeah. 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 That's how I know my friend. We were both teachers at the same school. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll let you know if
Yeah.
anything is really sideways.
Yes, please.
All right. Well, all right, perfect. Well, thank you, Christy, so much for joining us to talk about this.
Anytime.
I wanted to preface this saying that I am really excited that we have this process in place, because I do feel like we need some sort of evaluation criteria for maturity from the product standpoint. As I do feel like when I talk to customers, there isn't really a great understanding of how we move products forward. So that's really exciting to hear, because the more evaluation and results focus that we have, the stronger that we're going to get.
Yep.
I will say though, when I moved the release orchestration category from minimal to viable, we made that change back in, like we discussed at the end of February. The new maturity process wasn't merged yet in the handbook. So we were using the same definitions that were in the handbook and the rebaseline process that Hyana did, using the user insights from there to validate the move in maturity. So if I could accomplish two things out of meeting today with you all, the first one would be one, just to kind of share what we did to declare that maturity move and to make it so that one, we can hopefully declare that that's an acceptable move to make, or number two, understand the overall goals for the new category scorecard process, and if we should declare a new job to be done to run through the process, so that we can qualify the release orchestration stage.
Would more context around this be helpful before? I would still love to hear what you've done, just because I think it's interesting. But it would be helpful to understand kind of why we are where we are with it.
Yeah, I think all of that information would be super good to have. So please.
Okay, cool. So Sid was the one who basically looked at our maturity model and went, I don't like that this is so subjective. And realistically, I was like, hooray, we don't like that it's so subjective either. He said, I really want to get to a place where we are doing this objectively and our customers are telling us what we think our maturity is. And what was nice about it, he said, basically, Christy, look, I'm giving UX a lever here because we know that, and by the way, I don't mean this directed at this particular team because I don't think this is true. Jackie, I know UX is very important to you. Broadly, we don't give UX enough attention. It can get sidelined for other concerns. So this is a way for him to raise it in the priority list because it's important for everyone. So my response was like, philosophically, yay. Oh my God, this is going to be hard because no one has ever done it before. We have a ton of stage groups, so it's not an insignificant amount of work. So we had to get a process in place. There was no foundational place to just say, oh, like, well, this is how companies do this. We'll just go do that. No, this is all us. So we spent a considerable amount of time, Scott and me in particular, trying to figure out where are we going to start. Some of the ideas we tossed around were picking just kind of at random, I guess random is not the right way to say it, but like looking at like 2 in lovable, 2 incomplete, and 2 in viable. And just to start and say like, hey, we need to start validating somewhere. How, like, where do we start? How do we learn? Let's start with these. Let's see what comes out of it. Ultimately, what Scott asked for was, hey, we just moved a bunch of things and or are about to move a bunch of things as part of our Q4 OKR. Please start there. So that's how release orchestration ended up on the list of things that were included in the pilot. Because we have so many stage groups, like everybody's going to have to go through this multiple times, right? Because it's every time you move up. If we don't start doing it, like we're never going to get there. Even at our current rate, I think it's going to take us a year to validate all of these things. So that's the context for why release orchestration, why now, and also I think gives you some insight into the impact of saying, well, we're not going to do it for release orchestration. Okay, if we're not going to do it for release orchestration, what are we going to do it for?
Yeah, I understand that. I would say that at the core, I am fundamentally worried that our putting layers between the customer and the value that we deliver for a customer is going to slow down our velocity. And that's ultimately the metric that we're all getting held accountable to at the end of the day, is how much value we're driving for the end user. And I would say when I joined Release as a stage in November, we were delivering 20 MRs a month. And this past milestone, we delivered 37 MRs in release management alone. So the scale that we're seeing, an exponential improvement based on how Hyana and I are working together with engineering, the reduction in cycle time, the throughput of engineering, the value that we're driving for customers, definitely validates that customer iteration is super important, because we've had well over, I think, 42 individual customer interviews between opportunity canvas and solution validation, but also when Hyana and I went through and structurally interviewed customers on how to create a release, that job to be done has over 5 months of validation behind it and all the UXR insights. So what we can do is maybe map all of that data and information to the maturity scorecard template, rather than having to conduct 5 new user interviews, because we already have a huge knowledge base of user insights, which isn't a universal truth across the entire product management organization. I would say we are the exception there.
Yeah. Look, I want to acknowledge that I think y'all are doing things in a really appropriate way. The challenge we're going to run into, so first of all, yeah, every time we add something to our process, it could have a potential impact on velocity. And that's one of the things I think that we should look at coming out of this pilot, which is why we're running it as a pilot, is what was the impact? But until we go and do it, we don't know what the impact is. So that we could go back, for example, to Sid and say, okay, we did 37 MRs in this time frame. Now we've added this to the process. We were able to do this many MRs. Is that okay? Is it worth it? Is it not? The other thing I want to think about is, and Lori would be a better person to talk about this than me. So I'm going to say a thing, and then I'm going to let Lori jump in. We have to have a consistent and rigorous process to be able to say, like, we're doing this the same way. We've asked the same question. We've asked it the same way. So now we know when we say something is this level of maturity, like, we know that it's this level of maturity. If we start kind of playing with that before we've even started, before we even know anything about it, I think we start diverging off of the path already. And there are some specific questions that are part of the category maturity scorecard that just, I don't think there's any way you would have asked them when you were doing this user research, because we weren't doing it yet. But Lori, can you feel free to disagree with me, by the way, too. That's always totally fine.
No, of course. Well, the frame that we're using is benchmark, right? And if you're doing a benchmark, you need to be asking the same questions in the same way each time so you can compare the results backwards. What this team has done, and then I talked to them the other day about this, is why we're here. It's almost as if they've jumped past this whole thing that we're trying to prove and have gotten, like, they leveled up. They're like at a level 11. They have already infused the UX into their process. And they've done it for 3 milestones already. So they've got a really high level of confidence with the decisions they've made. So what we talked about is looking at that scorecard and the process, and then looking at the data that they've gathered and seeing if they can map that data to the scorecard process. And if they see any holes in that process, let's talk about that, because us as a team, we weren't really sure if they had asked all those questions that we have outlined in that benchmark process. And if they hadn't, we would come back and talk about that and how to gather that data. Do we need those 5 people? Do we need another research effort? I don't know yet. Let's look at that data and see how it matches. So that's kind of where we were, but we also didn't want to go too far without having a conversation with you about that to see, as part of this experiment, because like I view what they are doing as part of this experiment too, because this is ultimately where we want people to be, right? We want them to be using the UX all the way through to gain confidence at every stage with their decisions. We've started with this benchmarking of the scorecard because it's a good place for a lot of people to start at, right? But for this team and like Tim and Ian's team as well, they are so far away from the starting point. Like they were there a couple months ago before we even thought about this. So that's kind of where we were, where we've landed with looking at the data, trying to retrospectively put it into that experience of the benchmark to see if we can. And then if we can't, then we would go and see what the next steps would be.
And we also discussed, go ahead. Oh, sorry. We also discussed picking a different job to be done in release orchestration and doing the process for that. Just because we've spent the past 5 months validating and revalidating the creator release job to be done. So it feels like we have way too much data. We already have our own internal biases about that job to be done, that it just doesn't seem like it would be a natural fit for this scorecard.
Okay, that is all fair. So my first question is, how long do we think it would take to get us an answer about the gaps?
Hayana, I think you already have that answer.
Okay.
I did. So there's in the notes of this document. So I looked into the requirements from the handbook page about category maturity. And from the 10 requirements, the things we don't have are the number of clicks the users did, but I can go back and watch the videos and just count them because we have all the recordings. And we also did not directly ask them some of the questions that are like, how confident are you on a scale from 0 to 10? But we have those this type of data because people are very, vocal about their experience with release management. So I'm very confident that with the data that we have and the documents that we have access to, I can fill most of the gap. But we did do, for example, that's the only biggest thing that is documenting it on the structure of the scorecard.
That's very helpful. Look, counting clicks, I'll be honest with you, that is the part of the process that I am personally the least confident adds value to the scorecards. Okay, so we debated this a lot, and where I landed was to defer to the researcher who was coming up with the process because we didn't know. So I went, okay, you're the expert here, I'm not. But we also said we would revisit that decision. So I think what I would ask maybe, and Lori, tell me if you're comfortable with this or not, would you be willing to take this feedback back to the research team and say, hey, we know this is part of the process, but from a research standpoint even, we're not sure how valuable this is. And that way we can come to a conclusion.
Yeah, I think that if we could look at this data, because like this is like a prime perfect project to look at the data, then look at the clicks and like the clicks don't mean anything.
That's great. Okay, so we agree, Lori.
Yeah, I agree completely. The clicks are just stupid. Okay. You don't measure that.
I am going to trust you, Lori, to take that, and
I will. I'll bring it up at our next team meeting. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, the other gap that I assumed you had was around asking the questions about confidence. So if Lori is partnered with Hayana and y'all come out of that and you feel very confident on it together, then I'm okay with that. So that leaves us with, though, one of the big points of this OKR was to vet the process. Because we know it's just like we just said, we don't think click counting is particularly useful. There are parts of the process that are wrong. And we have to go through it, though, to know what those things are. If you want to do that on a different job to be done, I have zero problem with that. That is fine. Can you do that? Like, do you have the time and the bandwidth to do that?
So, would you, this doesn't count for minimal moves, right? For moves to minimal, it's only to viable.
What we decided was, and again, after much discussion, was we were trying to make the scope of this project smaller. And where we landed was, well, we're doing so much doing so much upfront research between problem and solution validation to get something to what we are going to call minimal, that we decided it wasn't as valuable to do it on a move to minimal, and that we would allow the PMs to make the call on minimal. So yes, it starts on a move from minimal to viable.
Perfect. Okay. So if we wanted to declare another job to be done in order to count the release orchestration as viable, I would be really worried about the bandwidth, mainly because going back to the velocity comment that I was mentioning, if we look at the key results that we're trying to accomplish, it's driving and influencing IACV and revenue. And I have 3 deals next quarter that I'm trying to influence with both secrets management and a CI/CD dashboard. So those are the 2 things that Hayana has on her docket for design this month and next month for us to then deliver to engineering and execute accordingly for our major release and the release after. So I'm very anxious to declare that we would want to select another job to be done, but I'm happy to discuss with Hayana and see if that's what we'd want to do and not count the release orchestration move to viable. I am disappointed that that's how that would end up. But I understand that part of this is to validate the muscle building processes that we're trying to put in place.
Yeah. And look, I get the situation that you're in. So I want to express empathy for why you're like, oh God. I think the problem we're going to keep running into is that every PM is going to feel this way. Like, when is the milestone where you don't have something super valuable and customer impacting to deliver?
But that's exactly what I was telling Nadia and Lori in our last call, was that we could do this for release orchestration move to complete next quarter, because we're looking to move release orchestration next quarter. And that would be something that we could definitely, the job to be done would be, I can track progress of a release in GitLab. And that would be the feature set that we're executing against in 12.10 and 13 and 13.1. So
do me a favor then. If that's what we're going to do, comment in the OKR issue. This is one of our OKRs for the quarter.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, you call me ma'am. I must be very intimidating right now.
my Southern is coming out. Sorry.
Sorry, no, that threw me for a loop. Okay. Yeah, comment in the OKR issue. Say that, like, commit to it. Mention Scott, because this impacts PM too. At some point, we've got to be able to. We are going to be held accountable for making progress on this initiative. So I want Scott to be aware and bought into this. And then what I'll end up doing is, when we score the OKR, we always do good, bad, try as a retrospective for each OKR, and I'll put the details. So give me these details and I'll put those details in the OKR. And that way, because it's going to be linked from the handbook. So if Sid wants to look at it, he will also have that information available to him.
Perfect. So I can log this on both the product OKR and the linked UX OKR. Would that be right?
OKR for this?
Well, we had the product OKR from last quarter, I think, that had this. Let me try to find it.
Okay.
I think it did have maturity.
Okay.
That we needed to link.
So I guess my answer is absolutely do it on the UX OKR. If it makes sense to do it on the product OKR, do it there.
Got it. Okay, perfect. I will link this. So does this mean that we do count the release orchestration move to viable?
If once Lori and Hyana look at it together, and okay. I'm gonna rely on Lori to be this person.
Okay. And then we will, like, I'm so on board with testing this for the move to complete thoroughly and confidently. I'm just, again, anxious for us to declare this OKR valid, given that we did all this other work for it with the previous job to be done. Just, okay. I can't think of another job to be done for release orchestration that would capture the completeness as much as creator release would be.
Okay. I'll be interested to see where y'all land.
Okay.
With this. Because again, I'm back to, we know the process isn't 100% right. I do think going forward, because now we know that we're doing this, we'll automatically start to bake some of this in anyway. Right. But I think it'll be interesting to see whether we can do that retroactively now. So I'll be looking forward to learning more.
I am a little curious on your expectation of like deviation in the moment. So when we conduct these 5 interviews, are you expecting adherence at 100% or at 75% based on the interviewee? Would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Let me give you the best answer I can, because what we're working with is a process that no one has used. Trying to think of how to say this.
Because we can comply and then at the very end ask the additional questions and be like, hey, I really wouldn't have asked this question if I had full reign over my interviewing faculties.
Yeah, I mean, okay. The most...
Do we need to pause the recording? We can totally pause it and then edit it in the back.
It's not that. This is such an unknown that I'm having trouble even talking about it yet, which is why we're wanting to go through the process. So I will tell you what was important to me. What was important to me is we put the task in front of the user, we see how they use it, we get the information about where it's not going well. Because that was one of the things we really debated too, was like, there was a point at which the recommendation was, and no talk out loud. And I was like, I cannot come out of these research sessions and say to a PM, you can't move up in maturity. And when the PM says why, say, I don't know because we didn't have.
When we're not benchmarking time. We're not benchmarking time. We're benchmarking the effort and the level of confidence they have in things. So yes, thank you, Christy.
So to me, this is task-based. I want to come out of it with meaningful information that we can take action on. And then the most important part to me is for the user to verbally express their level of confidence in the maturity level, asking the question the way that we have asked them to ask the question.
So it's the scale, getting that scale number is the number one thing. Okay, so that nails it for me, because we're doing a lot of the interviewing and questioning, but if it really is to get that quantifiable scale of confidence and comfort in our product, then that is very workable. I don't think it necessarily is as counter to the values that I thought it was. When I first read this process, I was like, this is so inefficient. It's going to take such a long time. That's really against what GitLab believes in. But hearing that key result of having a scale for confidence just puts me at immense ease. So thank you for saying that.
Yes. And I want to give Nadia credit. I think all of the managers had expressed the same concerns.
Good.
I believe that we will change this process. I will rely on the people who are trying to use it to come back and say, I tried this. Here are the things that worked. Here are the things that did not work. Take these things out, change this thing a little bit. That's the only way we're going to know how to do this. So that's why I keep saying your feedback is critical. And I agree. My goal is for this to be as useful as user research always is at the end of it, and as lightweight as we could possibly make it, while still having confidence and rigor. Those are my only goals.
That makes perfect sense.
Cool.
Hyana, I think we have one more minute. Do you have anything else that you would want to add to this?
No, not really. I think we covered everything. And I'm going to look into the template in the upcoming days and see how I can collect the data that we have. And I'll just take a stab at creating it, Lori, and then I'll add you to the loop.
Perfect.
Because, yeah, I logged all those user insights, so I know where to find things.
Good.
And
We've got those in our back pocket. I'm pretty excited about it.
Yes.
And then we can continue the conversation. I'll make sure I ping everyone here so we know about the status updates.
Perfect.
Thank you for putting this together. Thank you for a very productive discussion. Thank you for being a team who works so well together and cares so much about experience. As everybody on this call, I really, really appreciate that. Thank you for helping to refine this. I know you are guinea pigs, and I'm sorry.
Thank you. Just hearing those words means a lot, and it's a lot of consolation, because I did have my anxiety's been ramped up from this, because I'm just like, oh, we're never gonna get it. We're never gonna get it. So just hearing that was
somebody's got to be the guinea pig. I'm not expecting perfection. I am expecting to learn from this.
Perfect.
We can do it better.
That's helpful. Okay. Well, thank you all for your time. This has been amazing. I appreciate every one of you. So thank you.
Go team.
Bye,
Bye, ladies.
Bye.
Thanks.